The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get stinko.
This is the Giles and the Goalie podcast as part of the Zone Coverage Podcast Network. With your hosts, Giles Farrell and Ben Remington.
Welcome to the Giles and the Goalie podcast. I am your host, Giles Farrell. Of course, joining me as always is Ben Remington.
Hello.
And Ben, we are in the presence of Joey Bishop once again. But not actually Joey Bishop, but we consider him our Joey Bishop. And that is our second most frequent guest of all time. That is Nate Wells.
Woo! Hey guys. Hey.
We snuck you in on the show this week to avoid Tom punishing us by having him come on for a show. So expect somewhere in the near future Tom wiggles his way into a show.
I mean, that's how Tom gets on the show, so.
Yeah. He doesn't want you to sneak up on his record.
Yeah.
Nate, how is life on the East Coast right now? Or I should say, how is isolation treating you out on the East Coast?
Well, surviving. It's odd. I'm not gonna lie. Just used to being in a very dense city, seeing a ton of people, and that's not the case. Pretty much every place, any business that's open, and there's not too many, are you have to wear a mask to get in. And it's quiet. We have the only time that you hear stuff usually is we'll hear some ambulance going by, and I know it's 7:00 when everyone starts clapping the shift change. So it's a little weird. I mean, I'm outside. I'm basically I'm next to New York City, so right smack dab in the heart of just pretty much the outbreak right now. So, but we've been getting by. So hopefully we're hitting at least the worst right now.
Yeah, everyone on your side doing well as can be.
Yeah, everyone's doing well. Yeah, my girlfriend and I are both working from home, so it's fine there. It's just sharing a very small space to get by.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I'm sharing a medium-sized house with my wife and child, and it can be a little bit nerve-wracking sometimes. So I can't even imagine a metro area apartment like that.
Yeah, it's I really like our apartment, but it's certainly something when you spend every waking minute of all the time here. So you appreciate it. You appreciate it more or less.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, you start to think, like, when this first happened, like, you start to think, oh, cool, like, work from home for a little bit, that'll be nice. And now I'm a month into this work from home deal, and I want to go back to work horribly bad. And it's not that I don't enjoy, the company of Jamie and the animals. It's just that feeling of, I don't know. It's more of I want a feeling of normalcy to happen again. Going to work every day and just kind of having normal routines again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's completely understandable. And yeah, it's kind of last month's been thrown up for a loop because usually March is just, covering sports is it's one of my busiest times of the year. And it's pretty much, I saw the week before everything kind of went down, I was going to go out to State College to cover the Gophers playing Penn State. And then it's like I had regionals, I had a couple Frozen Fours. I was supposed to be in Detroit this past weekend, so it's still trying to kind of get used to that and just either adjusting to new normalcy or just kind of appreciating things a little more.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Let's dive into it this week. We have Nate joining us this week as we are going to count down the 10 most prominent figures in Minnesota hockey history. So perhaps nobody better to chime in the discussion on that than Nate, and I will give the floor to Ben to go over the ground rules of said list.
Yeah, so, I don't want people to think that I spent hours of research poring over this, and I very much made this a loose kind of off-the-cuff list because I wanted some discussion with Nate and Giles about it. I certainly don't claim to be an expert, even as much as those two. But yeah, it was basically the 10 most important figures in Minnesota hockey. There probably some recency bias there. I'll be the first to admit that. I wasn't a super. I mean, I followed hockey when I was younger, but I didn't know a whole lot about the local scene, as it were. I wasn't a big college fan until I got more towards into high school, which was a long time ago, but not that long ago. So yeah, that's just kind of my general thoughts. It's kind of a combination of influential people, important people. Just kind of an all-encompassing list. So there's really a lot of room for interpretation there. And I'm definitely going to be very wrong on some of these rankings. So that's why we recruited Nate and his wealth of knowledge. And Giles is certainly not afraid of setting me straight either. So I'll start off the list. This one, I think is well-deserved. I think that this I actually lumped two folks together, and because I didn't want to pick one, and you'll understand why, but I wanted there to be a spot for women's hockey in this list because even though women's hockey is kind of a recent development, relatively speaking, even in Minnesota, it's really blown up. And Minnesota is certainly, just as much as it is for men's hockey, it's very, very much a hotbed for women's hockey. The Gopher women's program is even more successful than the men's program since its inception. So I think that this is very fair. At number 10 on my list, I have a combination of Brad Frost and Lisa Halderson, both the head coaches in the history of the women's Gopher hockey program. Both of them with a fistful of titles to their name. Both of them obviously did their fair share of building up that program to an absolute powerhouse, which I'm sure Nate can speak at length about. But I wanted to give women's hockey a spot on this list. I didn't want to understate the importance of it to the state, even though obviously when everybody thinks Minnesota hockey, they think of the boys and the college and even the pros.
All right.
What do you guys think?
Yeah, I'd agree that you certainly would put Frost Halderson on just the Gophers program as a whole. I mean, 7 national championships in 20 years. No one has more Frozen Fours as a program. I think they're going for their before the season shut down. I think they're going for their 15th since 2000.
Wow.
One of the things I think, just more importantly, I think you also look across. I did a feature on this for Minnesota hockey, where you just look at the number of coaches that have come out of like the Minnesota program in the high schools and states. The Whitecaps are pretty much Gophers.
Right.
Rhonda Courtney Englehart, coming from the Hallerson years. So yeah, it's very influential. We're kind of seeing that next generation of players coming out. I think you'd probably also, if I had to throw in a couple more women's hockey players, I think are kind of really influential on the list. It'd definitely be Chris. I'd probably put some combination of Natalie Darts, Chrissy Wendell, and Jenny Potter.
Sure.
Because those are kind of those three that could come to mind, like right when I guess also Winnie Broke Brown, probably just for what she's done with the Whitecaps. Just college players who are pretty much the first few Minnesota Miss Hockey, and just a major, just kind of those major influences at the top. But yeah, I think just with the Gopher program, it's amazing to just kind of see the culture that's been built. Very successful, but it's also they don't take themselves as too seriously. They want to win. They're very talented, but at the end of the day, it's one of the things like Frost does really well is just these building better people that just happen to be very good hockey players.
Yeah, this isn't Kentucky basketball.
Not at all.
So anyway, moving down the list, I'll admit I kind of wanted to get a little bit of a swath of different types of people. And so I wanted a media member, and obviously Michael Russo is an obvious choice. I think Michael Russo is phenomenal and great at his job, and he definitely is an honorable mention to this list. But my one media member that I picked for this list was the great Al Shaver, who was the voice of the Minnesota North Stars for their entirety, also the voice of the Wild for their first season. Such a legend and such a well-respected play-by-play guy. Such a iconic, I think, is this great word to describe him. So much so that the Wild named their press box the Al Shaver press box. So Al Shaver comes in at number 9 for me, just kind of representing media and announcing folks everywhere. Do you think that that's a good representation, guys, or is there someone that I'm missing?
I mean, that's probably the most polarizing media person when you think of Minnesota hockey and the kind of history that we come to know and love. I'd probably give an honorable mention to Bob Kurtz in there because
absolutely.
He's been around for quite a while, even predating the Wild. I know for a little bit of time he was play-by-play of the Minnesota high school tournament, so he has a little more Minnesota history with him than just the Wild. But Al Shaver certainly probably the most polarizing media member.
Why do you think he's polarizing? Is there something I missed?
Maybe polarizing wasn't the right word, but
okay.
You think of
I was
just
gonna say, did he kill someone or something? Was there something that did he say something racist?
I guess I just associate the word polarizing with the biggest name or something. I don't know.
Oh, sure.
Maybe
okay.
maybe it has a different meaning, and I just never cared to look at it. But I just feel like you think of voices of Minnesota hockey. You're probably going to start with Al Shaver, and then you're probably going to think of Wally Shaver calls the Gophers, and
right.
Frank Mazzacco does radio now for the Gophers and did TV for the longest time when the Gophers were on FSN before they weirdly let him go. So yeah, I would definitely probably start with Al Shaver.
Sure. Okay. That's fair. Cool. All right. On to number 8. Again, I wanted a good mix. And this guy has definitely done it all the way from playing to the Gophers to general managing the North Stars. Number 8 is the great Lou Nanne. Certainly, if you want to say polarizing, he very well could be a polarizing figure. Some people might downplay his importance, but I think, like Shaver, he's iconic. He's a guy that everybody knows. Every Minnesota hockey fan knows who Lou Nanne is, and you can certainly dog his decisions as the general manager of the North Stars. But I think he's represented the state well when it comes to hockey. I think he's one of those types that has been an ambassador for a long time.
Yeah, I'd agree there, and also just the multiple roles that Nanne has done, whether it's playing, being a GM, coach, the role he's played with USA Hockey, the role that he's been media, being the color commentator for the high school state tournament for so many years, and just if you're talking about just influential Minnesota hockey people, I don't think you can have a list without having Lou Nanne on it.
Yeah, Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I didn't have him super high. Like I said, I think he's a little bit polarizing. Some folks are not fans, but yeah, I think he's literally done everything when it comes to Minnesota hockey. So
I'm kind of surprised he's checking in at number 8. You might get some flack on the social medias for having him a little down the list. So I'm curious to see who is coming in ahead of him.
Sure. And, and again, like I said before, there's probably some recency bias to this. Like, I know Lou Nanne as kind of a television personality or just a personality in general. I wasn't around, obviously, for his formative years. I never saw him play. I never saw him, the teams that he GM'd, that kind of thing. So I'll admit to that I'm probably a little recency bias on this. Anyway, so moving on to number 7, where we start to get into some players here. Number 7, I have South St. Paul's finest, Phil Housley. Great defenseman for many, many years. Buffalo and some other teams racked up a ton of points. Is near the top of the list for American-born players, not just Minnesota-born players. But fantastic NHL career. Obviously involved himself in the coaching ranks afterwards. Coached Buffalo for a couple of seasons there. Was even a high school hockey coach in Minnesota back when I was in high school at Stillwater. So Phil Housley is number 7 on this list, just for, again, a multitude of contributions that he's made to the state of hockey.
Yeah, I would. That's a good one. I would like to see him get another try as an NHL head coach, other than in Buffalo, which just seems to be a rotating door of head coaches at this point,
Right.
because they just can't seem to get it together. So I would certainly hope he gets another look somewhere else, maybe in a little more sane place than Buffalo. But yeah, it's another great name and a long list of them.
Yeah.
It's very Minnesota hockey that you can have a hockey Hall of Famer come back and coach high school.
True. Yeah, for sure.
I don't think there's too many other places that'll happen, and then go from high school to being an NHL assistant and an NHL coach.
Right. Yeah. No, it's not super common.
And he did it at Stillwater of all places. Like, he didn't go back to one of the prominent high schools. He went to Stillwater.
Did he live out? He must have lived out there.
Yeah, he did. Or he might still.
I worked with some kids that went to Stillwater at the time. Actually, I worked at a store that had two locations, and one of them was in Stillwater. So I worked with a couple of those kids that went there, and they knew him well enough. I'm pretty sure he went there. I think he had kids in school around that same time as well. I could be wrong. I don't know. Anyway, moving on to number 6, another player on this list. I'll be honest, he gets some bonus points because of who his dad was and what his dad has contributed to Minnesota hockey as well. But at number 6, I have Zach Parise. I can certainly hear the arguments he should be higher on this list, but I think Zach Parise is not only a great player and one of the greatest Minnesota-born players to play in the NHL, but I think him signing here was a huge deal for Minnesota hockey. I mean, obviously Ryan Suter is a phenomenal player, and I guess you can kind of make the argument that he's local, even though Madison is very much not in the state of hockey. But I think Parise signing here was a huge deal. I think it was something that means a lot to a lot of Minnesota hockey fans. And obviously what J.P. Parise did with Shattuck St. Mary, in addition to his time with the North Stars, is pretty huge for the state of hockey. So I have Zach Parise at number 6. Do you guys feel like that's about right, or should he maybe be higher, considering I kind of tacked on his dad to him?
I feel like that's probably about right. You can maybe argue a couple of spots higher, a couple of spots lower. It'd probably be easier to have a couple of spots higher if the Wild had a little more success. But you mentioned it. I think you mentioned what I was thinking is that it's really, when we're going to be able to look back the last decade of hockey for the Minnesota Wild, it's going to be the Parise Suter era.
Oh yeah, for sure.
It may not be the highest scorer. They may not be the flashiest players at time, but you can't discuss the last decade without those moves happening. I remember the couple of years before that free agency, everyone was kind of wondering and kind of hoping that you'd have Parise come for the Wild, and it kind of at the time it seemed a little bit more like a pipe dream. And now that we look at it, having it happened, it certainly played a major role in the NHL franchise.
Yeah, for sure.
I'd probably knock him a few spots up the list had he not gone to a university to the northwest.
That's absolutely fair, Giles. I think that should be noted.
But that's probably a fair placement for him.
Okay, well, that's good. Good to hear. All right, so I'll admit the next two are I wouldn't say they're off the board, but they're definitely recency biased, and probably definitely championship biased. But I wanted to give some of our friends up Highway 35, a little bit of credit and a little bit of airtime. Number 5, I have Scott Sandelin. And again, you can hammer me for recency bias. That's totally fair. But at the same time, I think what he's done with the UMD program, 2 national championships, really taking that program from, I don't want to say it was an afterthought because it was always a decent program, but taking it from a team that is tough to play to a team that literally wins championships, I think is something that he should be commended for. And there's a reason why his name comes up every time there's an NHL job opening, because I think he's built up that good of a resume. So Scott Sandelin at number 5 for me. Is that too high, or is that just right because of the titles? What do you guys think?
I mean, yeah, it's kind of a good area to have him in, and it's really. I was thinking about this recently, where you have with the Bulldogs, they won 3 national championships in the 2010s. They finished second another time. What really is kind of remarkable is the fact that right before the first one happened, it was kind of, you thought that Sandelin was going to be on the hot seat, where he's kind of just running, not living up to kind of the expectations. And now you're talking about probably being a guy who, if you're looking at someone who would get hired from the college ranks, or at least going to get interviews, and he got an interview over this past summer. That's Scott Sandelin. It's he's done a great job recruiting and developing. He won last year's national championship with, I want to say, 16 or 17 Minnesotans. He's winning and taking them. He's winning with. He's a Hibbing guy. He's winning with Iron Rangers and Duluth, and just kind of having guys who were watching and growing up with those 2011 teams develop and just play major roles in the next generation of Duluth and Northern hockey players.
Right.
Yeah, if you take coaches who've had more than 40 games behind the bench at UMD, he's got the best winning percentage. And obviously, a lot of that success coming here in the last decade, and a deserving place on the list. You might get knocked for having him so high up the list, but it's hard to argue considering the recency bias and just continuing to be a contender in the NCAA tournament every year, despite the fact that this is college hockey and players have a shelf life.
Right. Yeah, especially good players in college hockey, as Nate can, I'm sure, tell us. The better you are, the less time you're going to be there. It's not the one and done of basketball, but it's also not the guaranteed 3 years of football either. I mean, there's kids that leave after 1 year, kids leave after 2, kids that stay the whole time. So it's really kind of a mixed bag. But yeah, really, truly impressive the program that he's built, the next level that he's brought that program to.
And he's won in different ways. He's won with different teams. He's had the fantastic teams, been able to move the puck really well. On the power play, he's had just kind of defensively shut down teams. I mean, honestly, I think the best team of the last 3 or 4 might be the one in 2017 that finished national runner-up, which kind of gets overlooked with the next year, they lost so many great players. They were playing a defense that I want to say had like 4 or 5 freshmen and a sophomore,
Jeez.
just really young and found their way into their own. And I mean, the NCAA tournament is kind of a bit of a crapshoot. The best team doesn't always win, but I know. I know. Trust me. I won my last 2 brackets by picking against St. Cloud State. So, but it's really almost the unexpected is expected. But he's won that way. Been a 3 seed, and really I thought the last one was remarkable because they had the expectations on them, and they were the team that was kind of hunted, and they're able to pull it off, being the number 2 or number 3 overall seed.
Sure. Okay. So moving on to number 4, and this is there's if I catch some flack for this, that's probably fine. But speaking of championships in the state of Minnesota, I have Don Lucia at number 4, and I'll probably admit that might be a little bit high, but with all respect to Doug Woog, and he didn't make my list, but I think he's absolutely an honorable mention. He's absolutely a guy that was certainly an influential coach in Minnesota history. Just didn't have quite the success that Lucia did, and Lucia really, came to this program and made it into a national championship contender. It felt like almost all the time, for at least for a decade there. Maybe the later years, not as much, but Don Lucia I have at number 4. Really kind of brought the University of Minnesota back to real, legitimate national promise each and every single year. And obviously the back-to-back titles were huge for those of us in this title-starved market. So I have Lucia at 4. Do you guys think that's too high given Sandelin is just behind him, or do you think that's a fair ranking?
I mean, I don't disagree with Lucia at 4. I just think that my list, if I made one, which one of these weeks I probably will, it probably would have included Wooger, but that's for another day. But
I probably unfairly held Woog's lack of success against him. He had some success. Don't get me wrong. I mean, obviously, he was around for a long time. He had some success, but the Gophers weren't in the national title picture much, if at all, under Woog, I think was my thought there.
I mean, there's probably a different, for not to be so punny with it, but there's probably a better ring to his time with the Gophers if that pipe in overtime in the '89 final is a goal, not just a pipe.
That's fair. That's probably fair.
I also think if we're talking about Woog, and I'll kind of get to where to rank the other ones, his influence also comes into just the importance of kind of community in Minnesota hockey, and just having his kind of recruiting with Minnesotans. Yeah. I think where Woog had a lot of success, and he did get to. The Gophers were pretty consistently in the NCAA tournament and playing well. And I reached into Frozen Fours throughout the 80s and 90s. Jones kind of touched on the 89 pipe, just missed to win the national championship. I think you kind of have to have that whole picture with Woog. He did kind of where he kind of faded towards the end, which is kind of not making that adaptation to where Minnesota hockey and just college hockey in general was going. And I think that's one of the things that Don Lucia did really well for a long time, was just kind of see where Minnesota hockey was going, kind of make those adjustments, bring in talented players that fit in with the system well, and still kind of continue to play up-tempo, puck possession Minnesota Gopher hockey. And he was able to kind of just get guys into the NHL, which you didn't always see as much with just Minnesota college hockey in general in the 80s and 90s. As to where I'd probably rank Lucia versus Sandelin, I think it depends on how much how much emphasis you put the national championships, because obviously 3 national championships compared to 2. Sandelin has that. I think Lucia has the better regular season record. I'm going off the top of my head. I would assume so.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, they had the Bulldogs haven't won a regular season title in like 30 plus, like 30, 35 years or something like that.
I did have them very close.
Gophers had a stretch of 6, and they've had several more. So it's kind of, I mean, it kind of goes back and forth to just kind of what you hold most important with those. But I'd probably put them kind of in the same areas.
Right. I did have them side by side on purpose, and I did give the nod to Lucia just because, I think that he's got a little bit more of a track record, a little bit more, not a ton, obviously. But like you mentioned, developed some more NHL players perhaps than Sandelin has so far. A little bit more consistency of success, with, like you said, the regular season titles and that kind of thing. So it's very close, though. And if any UMD fans want to jump down my throat more than they already do, I understand. But I think those two are really neck and neck. So it's splitting hairs. Anyway, so getting on with the list here. Number 3, I've got Neil Broughton. And, he might not be the best Minnesota hockey player, but he's certainly up there. He's certainly on the short list. And the fact that he was, he kind of did everything that Minnesotans care about, from high school to college, to being, one of the faces of the North Stars franchise for a long time, despite what a lot of folks will tell you about Mike Modano. I think he kind of did it all. And the cherry on top for me was obviously him being one of the stars of the 1980 Miracle on Ice team. That team is very special to Minnesotans for a lot of reasons. There was a very many Minnesotans on that team, and Neil Broughton kind of led the way. And so I have him as the top ranked player on this list. Like I said, even though he might not be the most talented Minnesota hockey player in history, but I think his resume kind of speaks for itself.
I mean, it's hard to find a player in the history of Minnesota hockey. In fact, there probably is no other player like this. Maybe I'm wrong, but that has just been so accomplished as a hockey player than Neil Broughton.
Right.
I believe he won the state tournament with Roseau. I could be wrong on that. But
I believe that's like the only thing he didn't win.
Okay. But yeah, he was, a huge figure at Roseau. Then he comes to the Gophers for 1 year. They win the title. Then he goes to the Olympic team, and they win the gold medal. Then he comes back to the Gophers, wins the Hobey Baker. And then he goes on to the NHL to play 15-ish years, and he ends up winning the Stanley Cup late in his career, I believe, with the Devils. And the cherry on top, as you kind of alluded to, but for me, the cherry on top was he spent, almost all of his hockey playing career in Minnesota.
Right.
Whether that was high school or college, and he was fortunate enough to be a North Stars player from 1981 when he signed with them up until the time that they left in '93. So literally, Minnesota had a front row seat to Neil Broughton's almost entire hockey career, and he very much should be the number 1 player on this list.
Right.
Yeah, he's certainly, just all the success, both team and individual there. I think probably besides like Lee Steckline, I can't think of someone who would beat him in just the honors as a Minnesotan. It's just, Olympic national championship, having that, and the goal they had to win the national championship is remarkable. It's pretty much that Blake Wheeler, kind of a similar fashion that Blake Wheeler did against North Dakota to win the WCHA Final 5.
Yeah, we don't give that goal enough love.
It's just, it's the first Hobey Baker Award winner. People would be happy to have one of those and just getting just
right.
what goes off as like a resume. It's just insane.
His office, like the things on the wall or on the shelves of his office, must just be absolutely obscene. There's just so much hardware there.
Yeah. It's a king's ransom of hardware.
Right. Puts all of my C-scored hockey trophies to shame. Anyway, so on to number 2 on this list, and I'll be honest, I'm not a Minnesota hockey historian type. I don't know a whole lot, and that's why I told you right off the bat there's going to be a lot of recency bias to this list. But one name I do know, and one name that everybody knows, with a celebrated career as a pro, and then obviously as quote unquote the godfather of Minnesota hockey, I have John Mariucci at number 2 on this list. Somebody who kind of really built up the Minnesota hockey program to be kind of handing it off to the Herb Brooks years and the success that it would have after that. But also, like I said, was a professional hockey player as well too, represented the state that way, and it was very good hockey player. So John Mariucci at number 2, the godfather of Minnesota hockey, the arena named after him and everything. Am I somehow too high on him on this list? I mean, I know he didn't win a ton of any national championships, but are his contributions to Minnesota hockey at a grassroots level enough to justify me putting him at number 2?
I kind of figured that he'd have to be up this high. Just the influence that Mariucci has, being an NHLer in an era that very few Americans were NHLers, playing the Olympics, coaching the Olympics. Coaching the Gophers and building up the program to just kind of take pride in having Minnesota players.
Yeah, he had the Woog Wall before there was a Woog Wall.
Yeah, and in an era where collegians were pretty much mostly Canadian. If you look at just the pride that Minnesota takes in its hockey and takes in Minnesota hockey, whether it's the high school tournament, college, and the NHL. I think a lot of it you have to kind of trace back that influence to John Mariucci. And yeah, for me, that would be one of the reasons why I think, he should be as high as he is.
Mm-hmm. Oh, good. I'm glad I wasn't totally wrong.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think coming into this, I had a pretty good idea who the top 2 were going to be, and John Mariucci was in that top 2. So
good. Okay. Well, glad to hear it. It's tough because obviously I wasn't around for any of that. So all I can do is kind of read Wikipedia and read the walls at 3M Arena at Mariucci to kind of get a feel for what he meant to this state because we weren't around back then. But that's reassuring. And obviously, number 1 at the beginning, when you even talk about Minnesota hockey, when you talk about important people in Minnesota hockey or even hockey in general, I think the list starts and ends with Herb Brooks. And I think that's kind of a slam dunk on top of a slam dunk. So, 2 through 10, you can certainly debate, I think. But if your list doesn't start with Herb Brooks, I think we're talking about a totally different list here. So, Herb Brooks, number 1 for me, obviously, legendary coach with the Gophers, even dabbled in some professional coaching that unfortunately didn't go quite as well. But the miracle on ice and representing Minnesota the way he did, even a high school hockey player playing with Johnson, he really is kind of the epitome of Minnesota hockey, and certainly the most famous and most successful name that you can think of when it comes to Minnesota hockey.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the run up to 1980, Herb Brooks, was just constantly churning out titles and titles with the Gophers and having them always, in the, even in the Frozen Four, if they weren't winning the national championship. And then he does the Miracle on Ice, and that's obviously the cherry on top of any conversation you're having of Herb Brooks, but just a fantastic career and probably the most rightfully glorified figure in Minnesota hockey history.
Sure.
Yeah, you have to put Herb Brooks number 1. We're combining a lot of the elements that we've been discussing the people on the way up, where you have the 3 national championships, kind of making go for hockey, that the team of the 1970s, even competing, winning the coaching a U.S. Olympic gold medal team. Obviously, the Miracle Ice being just probably one of, if not the preeminent hockey just events in our nation's history.
Absolutely.
Coaching in the NHL, being a player, being a high school player, and also I think something that we kind of take a little bit for granted now. He kind of helped St. Cloud State start their D1 program.
Yeah.
In the 80s.
Bob Motzko, yeah, obviously.
Yeah.
That's where his ties come in.
He was the coach there for a year and kind of put his own stamp on continuing to have more Minnesota hockey. I mean, we're not that far removed. We're only 30 years or whatever. There are only 2 Minnesota D1 teams. Now there's 5. And I mean, just the way that you have so much success in college hockey on the men's side with all these different teams.
Yeah.
I think you got to put a lot of that also in Herb Brooks, and that's just another thing to put him up there as number 1 on the list.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I'm glad. Obviously that's a slam dunk, like I said. But as far as the whole list goes, I want to get a little bit of feedback and spark some discussion. How do you guys think I did? Number 1 and number 2. The one thing that I didn't get on here, and I kind of do regret a little bit, is I don't really have any high school ties here. I don't have any high school coaches or administrators or anything like that dealing with the high school hockey tournament. Is that a mistake on here, or is high school just too wide of a spread to really claim anybody as more influential than all of these professionals and college legends? What do you guys think?
I feel like the one name, like, you can probably make the argument for, as much as, people love to hate on the city he coached in, but the one prominent name, you at least have to put in the honorable mention category of this list is Willard Eichela of Edina when it comes to the state tournament.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you kind of did a good job looking in the high school, because you have a lot of people who are high school adjacent where it plays a part.
Yeah.
It may not be the whole part, but I mean, we discussed Bro, and we discussed Nanny, discussed Brooks. You have a lot of people who it's certainly the high school tournament's important, and I think it's certainly part of the fabric of the state's hockey culture. But I don't know. It's too much. I don't know really anyone maybe besides Nanny where you're like, okay, you're pointing over. This is the high school person.
Yeah.
I think it's everybody. It's too big. It's too big to be one person.
Yeah, that's kind of what my thought was. I couldn't think of a name, and yeah, the Edina coach was a name. I actually was talking with our friends Joe and Tony about this last night, and Joe brought up the coach from Edina, and that's a fair point. But yeah, like I said, it's really a shotgun buckshot, like a spread rather of teams. I mean, there's so many, and it's really hard to to say one person it really stands out above the rest, kind of like some of these college coaches and professional players have. So
yeah, I agree. I think Nate hit it right on the head. There was plenty of high school adjacent people that kind of made it part of the list. It just, if you had to try and single out at one polarizing figure, that's why I threw out Willard Eichela. But if you're, I think probably another person who was not on the list and probably should be on the list, at least to me maybe, but can also fall in that kind of adjacent, high school adjacent category, with his teams just tearing through the state tournament before he went on to a otherworldly run at the University of Minnesota, and that's John Mayasich, who holds
you're right.
a lot of records, whether that's high school or University of Minnesota.
You're exactly where I was going, Giles.
That's fair. Yeah, go ahead, Nate. Sorry.
I was gonna say, yeah, I think that's probably one of the casualties, a little bit of maybe just the recency bias, and obviously none of us were alive for Mesic's heyday. But yeah, it's just the number of records have with those Evelyn teams, being the all-time leading scorer for the Gophers. He's the only number that's retired. And Mariuchin, just given the number of players who have come through that program, that's just really remarkable. Has an Olympic gold medal. Just so much. There's just so much you can take away with Mesic. Where I know a lot of people say like he's the best player they've ever seen, but I mean at the same time, obviously we're too young for that. But yeah, I guess I was starting to think Giles was saying maybe there's one person. I was like, oh yeah, we probably, if there's one person to probably kind of maybe sum up those high schools, it would probably be Mesic.
Yeah, again, like you mentioned, it's my own recency bias where I had left him out. That's on me, and honestly, if I had to redo this list, he would be on it. But like I said, I tried to get a swath too. I think Mesic is probably more influential and important than Al Shaver. But like I said, I did want somebody from the media in there. I wanted somebody that kind of represented that whole facet of hockey. So. Yeah, I think that's definitely a worthy snub. Is there anyone else that you guys could think of that would maybe sneak into the top 10? Is there anyone that, looking at the list on the whole, you think was egregiously over or underranked?
I mean, I think that's a pretty good list overall. There's obviously going to be some snubs here and there, but that's why. We have these lists. It sparks a discussion. And I kind of mentioned the two people I probably would have found a way in there. John Mayasic and Doug Woog. But
Sure.
Otherwise, hard to argue with the list there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I guess the more I think about it, the more I'd probably try to find a way to put Winnie Brown on that list as well.
Okay.
Just being first Minnesota Miss Hockey, winning championship with the Gophers, just the influence that she's had with the Whitecaps, obviously winning a Clarkson Cup, NWHL, playing with the Team USA, and I think the influence that she's also had with like this generation of women's hockey players growing up. I think you kind of can't take away from that. So at least in my list, I'm trying to kind of combine people who have influence both on the ice and putting up and contributing, and just the influence that they've kind of had in shaping Minnesota hockey. So I'd probably try to find a way to sneak her in on that list. I mean, there's so many people that try to find a way.
Right, it's tough. It really is.
Yeah,
and that's how. I mean, obviously, I'm very aware of what Doug Woog did, and like I said, I completely whiffed on Mesic, but it's hard. It's hard to touch on the things you want to touch on. Like I wanted to get women's hockey in there. I wanted to get journalism in there. I wanted to find a place for Lou Nanny and all the different things that he's done. And obviously, you have to have some players and coaches in there as well. So it's tough. It's really tough to kind of make that cutoff.
Yeah, and there's so many different eras that people kind of can define. Yeah, it's difficult. That's the thing. I was thinking, I'm like, I don't know who I'd take out. I'd take out of your list. There are people I'd want to add, but like I don't know who I'd take out. It's just it's tough to put together 10.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. All right. Yeah, that's all I got, guys. Is anything else that you guys think?
No. I mean that's a good list. Actually, now that I think about it, we can probably just have if people don't feel high school was respected enough, we could probably have just a high school hockey figures list unto itself.
Probably
because there have been some really polarizing. I keep using that word. Prominent high school hockey, figures and even players, and some didn't quite pan out in either college and or the pros, but they were household names in the state tournament. So that could be a list unto itself.
like Dave Spihar.
I was just
Yeah.
about to say, what's the
Dave
podcast
Spihar.
version of subtweeting? Because what we're doing for Dave Spihar.
Brian Bonin won as well. That high school legend and Gopher great, but obviously was didn't pan out very well in the pros. And there's a lot of names like that. Tons of names like that. Obviously,
My
guys
guy
that
Johnny Pohl.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, tons of them.
So who are your guys' favorite of those like Minnesota, like those big Minnesota players who were great in high school and college that just didn't make it to the pros? 'Cause I feel like that's something that, at least in the state, that it exists. It exists for us, but doesn't exist like elsewhere.
Yeah.
It's a good question. I had a soft spot for Bonin just because he was a Gopher when I kind of started watching them closely. And from North St. Paul, White Bear Lake is obviously right next door. So he was kind of a guy that I watched closely.
Yeah,
I know he got a cup of coffee with the Wild, but obviously it wasn't much.
Yeah, Johnny Pohl was my guy. He was just a big commodity in Red Wing, and all you need to do is just take a drive down there to Red Wing for a game and just see the shrine that they've built for him in their arena. And then was just a huge part of the Gophers, including their 2002 title game, which he has a largely underrated goal, in my opinion, where he absolutely picks a corner from somewhere in the top of the face-off dot. So I always had a soft spot for him.
That game was running on Facebook last weekend as we're recording this, and there was so much about that game that I did not remember. Haven't happened.
What are you talking about? I've been watching it on DVD for years.
Mike Crawley is up there too. Just I kind of got really attached to those early '90s Bloomington Jefferson teams. When growing up and playing the Gophers.
Oh yeah, those are a good team.
I mean, I think you see that influence, just that style of play and defense, and just a lot of Minnesota NHLers now.
Yeah.
I kind of grew up in a different era of the NHL. Same with Bonin. But yeah, those are always those guys. I'm trying to think of who else would be a good one.
I will say I was a huge fan, and I understand that he hasn't had a great pro career, and I'm not upset about it. But Kyle Rao was a great Gopher. And obviously, is not really anything special as a pro, but talk about a career as a college hockey player.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and then you can go back to high school. Yeah, game winner, triple overtime,
Right?
State title. I mean, just insane competitor. It's I mean, even no one chirped more during a game than Rao, despite being 5'7", 5'8". Still always in game mode after the game.
Yeah.
I throw him. Justin Kloos is probably another guy who I really enjoyed kind of covering as a Gopher, kind of going in a different thing there. But yeah,
sure.
I'd be remiss if we had this kind of polarizing high schoolers / prominent college players, and not that any of us saw him play, but Pat Micheletti deserves a nod for having a very successful career, at least with the Gophers, and setting himself right in behind John Mayasich in some records that we thought were not anywhere touchable ever again.
I'm sorry, Giles, but you can't say the name Pat Micheletti without me laughing.
That's fair, but I'm just gonna put that out there.
No, I mean it's credit where credit's due. That's totally fair. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you get the entire Micheletti clan as a whole, that'd probably be a good honorable mention.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many families too that you could list off the Poles and Brodzinskis and Michelettis and
the Brodens too.
Yeah, Brodens. Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, well, I think we covered it all. Feel free to disagree with Ben on Twitter at Ben Remington about this list. His mentions are open, so feel free to yell at him about that. Nate, do you have anything you want to promote, or where people can find you?
You can follow me at Gopher State. I wrote for several outlets this year, most frequently NCAA.com. Season's kind of over, so I don't have too much. I'm trying to put something out in the next couple days as it's going to be released. That's kind of just a long look at the season and kind of everything kind of coming to an end and just kind of what to take stock of hockey in this environment. I also have kind of like a nice long feature I wrote for College Hockey Inc. I went up to RPI for their Big Red Freakout, which is just really it was just a really interesting weekend and kind of touches on just like the community of kind of everyone kind of coming back and just what college hockey means to just so many different people. So there's those. So those are a couple things I'd highly recommend. And yeah, follow me on Twitter at Gopher State. Usually anything I write, I will certainly promote like 5 or 6 times there.
Yeah, no, definitely. We will we'll check that out and knock on wood as we record this, but hopefully we get through this Nate's first time through the podcast without any audio issues. So
it just hit me while I was at the end. I'm like, wait, I should probably make sure that this is gonna that's just coming out. Make sure that this is not the second time that we've recorded episodes. Because I've definitely been on some that no one else heard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, it took us only 6.5 years to come up with semi-listenable audio. So
debatable, but yes,
we got there.
Yep.
Yeah, and again, check out Nate's stuff, and we will have a special edition of Giles and the Goalie later this week. You can look for an episode late Wednesday, early Thursday. With a very, very special guest that is near and dear to our hearts on this podcast. So apologies to Nate, who usually is the big headliner when he comes on our show for the week, but he has to, he'll understand when he sees who it is. He has to take a back seat on this one because we are jacked for our guest on Thursday. So check that out, and you can follow Ben and I on Twitter at Ben Remington, at Giles Farrell, the podcast Twitter at GATG Wild Podcast. Facebook, just search Giles and the Goalie. You can find us there. SoundCloud, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, anywhere you listen to podcasts, please subscribe and download. And if you listen on iTunes, drop us a rating. Also, you can find all our podcasts at zonecoverage.com along with our written work. So for Nate, who we thank again for joining the show this week, Ben and myself, we will talk to you again next week.
Later.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Gill and the Goaltender podcast.
That's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.